Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the South Donetsk direction where the Russians continue their offensive operation. First let's talk about the village of Vovchansk. Today the Russian sources published the video how they were bombing and attacking the southern and the central part of the village itself. This is very important because just yesterday the Russians shown another video from the southern direction of the village, and in this video we can see how the Russians were bombing the Ukrainian strongholds few hundred meters in the southern direction. Most likely under very heavy fire of Russian artillery, the Ukrainians were forced to fall back in the northern direction. Most likely the Russians during the previous few days managed to improve their positions and to reach the outskirts of Novokrainka. So once again, this is the area of Russian artillery strikes on the 2nd of October, on the 3rd of October, and this is the area of Russian artillery strikes today on the 4th of October. The Ukrainians obviously are retreating. Now let's move further and let's talk about the facilities in the last Ukrainian strongholds between Bagayavlenka and Ugledar. If you remember, just yesterday we were discussing this video where the Russians were bombing and attacking the final Ukrainian stronghold between the city of Ugledar and the village of Bagayavlenka, and we projected that most likely the Russians are about to begin offensive in the direction of this area and about to take this territory under complete control. And today we got changes on the ground. According to information we have, as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to improve their positions in the southwestern direction of the mine Southern Donbas number 3. We have geolocation that confirms Russian progress. In this video that was published by 72nd Mechanized Brigade, we can see several attacks on Russian vehicles that were abandoned along this tree line. As you can see, the FPV drone attacks took place to the north of the stronghold of these facilities, which confirms that during the previous few days, during the previous few hours, the Russians were trying to encircle the Ukrainians, to cut these facilities from the area of Bagayavlenka, to encircle the Ukrainians and to take this territory under complete control. Most likely by the next video or by the 5th of October, most of the mappers will adjust their maps in Russian favor and will color all these fields, tree lines and the fortifications under complete Russian control. Now let's move further. We continue receiving significant number of updates from the village of Katerynivka. I'll remind you that a few days ago pro-Russian sources reported about control over the fields between the village of Katerynivka and Kostiantynivka, and just today on the 4th of October the neutral mappers and the pro-Ukrainian mappers confirmed additional Russian progress on the ground. We have colored this territory as contested area because we still haven't received anything that can confirm Russian progress. Anyway, despite the fact whether this territory was captured by the Russians or not, we can see a very huge Russian activity on the territory of Katerynivka itself. For example, in this video we can see several FPV drone attacks on Ukrainian forces, Ukrainian positions in the village. We can see significant number of artillery strikes, secondary detonations. So summarizing everything, we can make a conclusion that the Russians answered the active phase of the assault of Katerynivka. Most likely during the upcoming week, during the next 5 days, Ukrainians will lose control over 30-40% of the village, because we see that the Russians are storming, the Russians are attacking. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Kurakhove direction. We received significant number of geolocations and updates. If you remember, just yesterday some pro-Russian sources reported that as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to break through the Ukrainian defense belt and to enter the village of Zherebets, and as a result of this attack, the Russians managed to make the creation of Kurakhove cauldron closer to the reality. And today on the 1st of October we got first geolocation that confirmed that yes, the Russians managed to answer the territory of Zherebets using the railways. The video was published by the 46th Air Mobile Brigade, and this video we can see several FPV drone attacks on the Russian forces that were heading from the prison, Selidovskaya prison number 82, in the direction of Zherebets using the railways. The Ukrainians attacked everything that that was moving. Some of the vehicles and tanks were damaged and destroyed by the Ukrainians, but most likely a lot of vehicles, a lot of equipment managed to enter the territory of this small village, and currently there are very heavy clashes on the territory of the settlement. Some neutral mappers have already adjusted that the Russians established control over 60% of the village, and just 40% of the village remains under complete Ukrainian control. We are talking about the southwestern part. Anyway, this is significant progress. Also, we start receiving updates from the village of Maximilianovka. We don't have any geolocations, we don't have any map changes, we just have some posts from very reliable sources on the ground, and the Russians are saying that as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to break through the Ukrainian defense belt and to improve their positions in the eastern part of the settlement, and the Russians managed to enter the northern part of the settlement. So most likely, and summarizing everything, we can make a conclusion that probably within the next 2 days, obviously by the end of the weekend, the Russians will be able to take the village of Maximilianovka under complete control, of course, if nothing special happens. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Tsukurina direction. As you can see, we have a lot of icons in this area. First, let's discuss the village of Tsukurina itself. Today, the pro-Ukrainian mappers confirmed that the eastern part of Tsukurina has fallen. The Russians control, according to Deep State, around 30% of the village. 20% of the village is in contested area, is in the gray zone, and just 50% of the village under complete Ukrainian control. And this post was published a few hours ago, so this is not the fresh information. And according to information we have, this morning the Russians managed to cross the railways and to enter the western part of the village and to capture the first streets by the name of Zherebets. This information was published today by pro-Russian sources somewhere at 10 a.m. So as you can see, the Russians are pushing further in the western direction with the purpose to take under control, complete control over the village of Kremenaya Balka and over the village by the name of Novoselidovka. If the Russians are able to do this, as we discussed in the previous video, then the Russians will be able to complete the complete encirclement of the Ukrainian forces that located in Gornyak, Izmailovka, Zaryane, in this area. And obviously there are significant number of forces. Of course, we're not talking about tens of thousands, but probably 2-3 thousands of soldiers are located in this pocket that can be encircled by the Russians within the next 10 days. Furthermore, I'll remind you that currently the Ukrainians have just one road for evacuation, just one road for support. This road goes from Stary Terny, then to Berestki, then to the village of Kurakhove, and then to the village of Zaryane, and also from the village of Garyana in the direction of Gornyak. So this is the situation, this is the only supply road, and we see that during the previous night the Russians published additional batch of videos of how they were destroying Ukrainian vehicles, artillery systems, evacuation machines, just separate soldiers exactly along this line. This is very important, and this is another evidence that the Russians have already established the operational encirclement, and that we can see currently we are facing another death road for the Ukrainians, or the Ukrainians are calling this the living road, the only road that Ukrainians still have possibilities to use to evacuate the guard zone from the area of Kurakhove. But obviously Zelensky is not going to do this. He will do the same as he did in the city of Ugledar. He will give the order to evacuate and to abandon positions, but obviously he will do this right after the Russians will close the cauldron. Once again, to understand the situation in this area, it's better to increase the numbers of this since the beginning of October, and we see the significant number of FPV drone attacks exactly along the main supply road. The situation for the Ukrainians is already a disaster. This is already a disaster, and this is already the last days. If we compare with the situation of Ugledar, this is already the final days of Ugledar. This is already the final days. Yes, there are no videos with flags, but it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of Zelensky's decision, how many soldiers he will leave there in another cauldron that's about to be created by the Russians. Now let's move further. We have some reports in the north of Selidova. The neutral mappers confirmed additional progress on the ground of the armored force of Russian Federation, and we have small changes on the ground on the territory of the village Lysovka. Just yesterday, the Russians entered the territory and digged in deeper, and today, according to information we have, according to different mappers, the Russians managed to improve their positions and to take under control several buildings. Now let's move further. As for the Toretsk direction, we have additional changes on the ground. I'll remind you that during the previous few weeks there were very heavy clashes for this dense network of the fortifications. The Russians, as you can see, managed to take under control around 50%. There are still 50% remains under Ukraine control, and the clashes in this direction continue. And today we got the video of how the Ukrainians were FPV droning the Russians that were trying to outflank the dense network of the fortifications, but were stopped by Ukraine FPV drones. Anyway, based on this video, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. Just a small progress on the ground into the north of this complex network of the fortifications. Now let's move further. As for the Chasiv Yar direction, we haven't received anything special, as well as for Siversk direction. Nothing happened during the previous 12 hours. We continue receiving updates from the line between Makiivka and Nevskaya. This is another very interesting direction, and almost every single day we receive another update of how the Russians managed to improve their positions. So every single day or every single 2 days we receive some changes on the ground, and you can see this right in front of your screen. Small progress to the west of Makiivka, small progress from Nevskaya in the direction of Novosadova, and today we got the video that was published by 67th Mechanized Brigade of the Armored Forces of Ukraine of how they were FPV droning and attacking the Russian vehicles exactly in this point. This video confirms additional Russian progress in the direction of Zherebets river. So the Ukrainians, as you can see, the Russians are about to finish this battle as well. Obviously, the battle for Russian bank of Zherebets river is not going to be finished tomorrow or the day after, but 2-3 weeks, and by the end of the new year of this year, this territory will be captured by the Russians. Now let's move further and let's talk about Peshchane. After a very long operational pause, the flower of Peshchane continued blooming, and today, according to different mappers, the Russians managed to improve their positions, and basically, according to pro-Ukrainian mappers Deep State, they reported that as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to answer the village of Kurakhove, because according to their map, this territory is already under complete Russian control. Just few buildings, but this is very important. This is these 3 buildings can't resolve anything and can't change the situation on the ground, but these 3 buildings is something like mental attack on the Ukrainian positions and Ukrainian forces in this area, because obviously their spirit and their willing to fight will be reduced if they know that the Russians have already entered the territory of the settlements along the river of Oskol. Now we don't need to calculate the distance between edge Russian positions and the villages itself, because the Russians already entered. Now we can count the distance between Russian positions in the village and the river of Oskol, and currently to get the river the Russians need to cross another 2 kilometers, and with which is obviously nothing in comparison with the progress they managed to achieve starting their movements from the village of Krokhmalne in the western direction. So the situation is very critical, and obviously during the next few days we're going to see additional progress on the ground. And obviously today, officially on the 4th of October of 2024, the territory, the northern Kupyansk direction, was split in two, to the northern Kupyansk and the central Kupyansk directions. Now let's move further. Let's talk about Vovchansk. The Russians continue reducing Vovchansk till ruins. Today we got another video of use of ADAP 1500. There are still very heavy clashes for the central citadel. The Russians are bombing the citadel with everything they have. It's like a polygon for them where they can test different weapon, test how the different weapon works on Ukrainian buildings, high-rise building areas, to understand how to move this area in the future very fast in other, let's say, directions. As for the Kursk area, we haven't received anything special. Both sides are regrouping. Most likely there are very heavy clashes, but during the previous 24 hours we haven't received anything that confirm additional progress, neither of the Russian forces nor of Ukrainian one. So the situation remains the same. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.